Okay, I realize we're still seeing people join, but we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Education as Regenerative Space webinar hosted by the Harvard University Human Flourishing Program's Community of Practice and co-hosted by the many excellent organizations you can see listed on the screen. My name is Matthew Lee, and I convene our monthly community meetings. Why are we offering this webinar? Well, research suggests that many people are languishing and only a relatively small percentage are fully flourishing, that the vast majority of employees are not engaged at work, and that many of the planet's life support systems are in decline. Within the field of education, and you can see it on this slide, the Gallup polling organization finds that student engagement drops dramatically as they proceed through the grades, as shown here in this graph. Nearly 8 out of 10 students are engaged in elementary school, but by high school, the number has fallen to 4 out of 10. If we add teachers, then only 3 out of 10 are engaged. Engaged people, according to Gallup, are those who are involved in, enthusiastic about, and committed to their work. Such findings raise an urgent question. How might classrooms and educational systems serve as more regenerative spaces that support human flourishing and planetary well-being? There are models, and I've shared a few works on the screen that might help us advance the conversation. We hope that our event today becomes part of a broader, compassionate response to the suffering of students, teachers, and school staff so that full flourishing becomes more attainable. After all, education was one of the fields identified by Tyler Vanderweel, director of our program here at Harvard, as an important pathway for flourishing. And you can see his model on the screen. The word regenerative has recently begun finding its way into book titles, including Regenerative Business, Agriculture, Environmental Design, and Leadership, among others. The book on regenerative education remains to be written. Our 5-minute flash talks today offer a small sampling of our community's contributions to this topic. We are encouraging a global conversation. We can look to creative thinking from other sectors for models of what regenerative education might look like. You can see on the screen a model of regenerative design, for example, which moves beyond the merely sustainable or even the restorative to full regeneration. Or consider this imaginary redesign of an art museum, in this case, the Tate Modern, where works of art are not arranged chronologically, but instead therapeutically, so that the visitor is taken on a compassionate journey from suffering and fear to love and self-knowledge. And so how might we design schools so that deep engagement and flourishing, rather than disengagement and languishing, is a primary output? So one thing that we can do in our schools is build in more time for contemplative reflection. And so our webinar models this today, so that you all can receive more deeply the wisdom that's being shared. So we will build in breaks for silent reflection, journaling, or even if you just need to get a glass of water and stretch your legs. We will start by inviting my 2 co-organizers of the webinar, Justin Blake and Christina Hinton, to offer a brief welcome, and then we will start our flash talk sessions. Justin, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. And also thank you to our participants and to all those who have joined us today for this really exciting thought leadership webinar. We are our greatest resource. Never more than now in history have we needed an education system to be reimagined, to be regenerative and transformative. And so excited about the sessions we're going to be hearing today with the flash talks. It's true that organizations don't transform people. It's people that transform organizations. And that's why these conversations and discussions are so important, to become more transformed people, to become more human, and to reimagine a better education and learning system for our young people, our educators, and our nations around the world. Very mindful that today's a very poignant day with the anniversary of the loss of George Floyd. We're looking for regenerative education, but we're also looking for a more transformative education that transforms our society as well as develops better human beings. So my thanks to Professor Matt Lee, to all our participants and all our delegates, and I'm going to hand now to Christina to take us forward. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I'm very happy to have us all come together today. And my hope for today is that we can make some connections that will help us do this work in the world and really help usher our young people kind of away from more narrow focuses and toward flourishing, and ultimately really usher our shared global community in that direction as well. Of course, as the young people grow up and have different outlooks, they can shape the future. And so that is my hope, that we will come together and do this work. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Justin and Christina, for helping to organize. And without further ado, we will move into our first four flash talks. We will have some time for conversation and then a short break. So I will invite first Julia Higdon to give a brief talk on creating regenerative spaces by design, empathy and curiosity to the front, grit to the back. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much. So yes, that is the title of this talk, this quick 5-minute flash talk. Empathy and curiosity to the front and grit to the back. Primarily thinking about how can we start, when we think about creating regenerative spaces, how can we start with design? So just as Matt mentioned, setting the stage, prior to the pandemic, we know from Gallup and others that, the statistics that were just cited, that students aren't engaged in schools, particularly as they get older, and many are bored. But as vaccination rates and other factors have allowed us to start, lifting our precautions and engaging with students more directly again, it's very possible that students will come in particular need of joy and stimulation, while we might feel the pressure of doubling down on closing the gap that we perceive on academics and, resorting to some of the strategies to try to help kids learn very quickly that might not necessarily be building the relationships and stimulating the joy that they're going to crave when they come back. Designing with empathy and curiosity means putting the everyday lived experiences of students, as well as their feelings, what they care about, and their goals at the center of what we plan and the opportunities that we structure for students. So what's so great about empathy? Empathy allows us to experience the thoughts and feelings of others. It's a method of design because it promotes true understanding of the needs and goals of students. In this case, we're talking about students, but you might be thinking about patients, and if you're in the medical setting, or customers, but we want the design to fit those needs. I'd like to offer these principles of designing with empathy: think, feel, care, and plan. First of all, thinking allows you to take the perspective of students cognitively, to understand their thoughts, to understand what they're going through on an intellectual level. Feel is to feel the students' emotions and to cultivate a bonded relationship with them. Caring means that we internalize those goals and we make a commitment to plan accordingly and to act. A lot of times, empathy can make us feel like we're already doing something. If we feel the feelings of others, we can think that we're already doing something. But we need to make a commitment to using those inputs and design accordingly. The goal of designing with empathy is student-centered design, not necessarily student-led design, because you also need to think about the educational goals, you need to think about the larger goals in the community, and you're the educational design expert. So you're not allowing the students to lead the design, you're putting the students at the center of the design. When we add curiosity into the mix, we need to cultivate a general understanding of motivation and engagement that was true prior to the pandemic. Differences between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, the bringing in meaning and purpose and autonomy, and thinking about the goals of young people generally in the context that they live in. What does engagement look like and how do you know it when you see it? So there's a basis of information there. Once you have that and, understanding how students learn and what works and what doesn't, you need to drill into the everyday lived experience of your students. What is it? How do you know? What are you trying? How is it working? And how do you know? And so I'd like to offer these design principles for curiosity, is to pause, look, learn, and plan. Pause is important because you need to dedicate time for observation and reflection. Looking deeply is important. Try to be an ethnographer. Take careful notes of what you see students doing. Take careful notes of their contexts and talk to them, interview them, understand what they're going through. Then you look for patterns. You look for cause and effect in that information. And again, you plan. Take these inputs into the design. And why is grit so bad? It's not always so bad, but you should approach it with skepticism. Certainly there are times when grit is called for, when you're solving the right problem and you're using the right strategy and the task is hard, grit gets the job done. But grit is actually problematic. It's the opposite of what you should be doing when you're solving the wrong problem, when your strategies aren't working. Then you need to switch. You need to be agile, you need to pivot, and perhaps realize you're solving the wrong problem or be willing to try a new strategy. And so that's why, when grit comes to the fore, we should be very mindful of that, and we should be skeptical of that as an approach. And we will be tempted to double down on that. We will be tempted to be gritty when the students come back. That's all. There's my information, my email. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to talk to you more.
Thank you, Julia. Wonderful way to get us started, and wonderful work that you're doing with Avenues. We will, without any delay, move to our next speakers, Katie Granville-Chapman and Emmy Bidston, on leadership for flourishing and opportunity. Welcome, Katie and Emmy.
Thank you so much, Matt, and lovely to see everyone today. I'm going to start with a quote by Dr. Ham Jinnot, the psychologist, who wrote, "I have come to a frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized." We all know that teachers have this incredible power. It's the teachers who make the climate, they create the weather, they create the regenerative spaces where children can flourish. However, they can only create those climates of flourishing if they themselves are flourishing and thriving. And one of the most significant factors in their flourishing is the leadership that they're experiencing. It's the way their middle leaders, their head teachers are treating them. It's the climate that those leaders are creating. And Katie and I are therefore really passionate about helping leaders to develop a vision that will help others to flourish. Imagine the difference if every school leader used their leadership to generate possibilities for others, if they sacrificed opportunities for their own advancement to intentionally create pathways for other people to prosper, if every leader in a school was motivated by serving others in love and has an expansive vision for a better future that they co-created with their staff. If they were focused firstly on becoming better people, because that's what will make them better leaders and create a better world. If they were measured on how well their teams were flourishing, not the results they achieved, and if that's the standard that they held their staff to. So we really want to be part of changing the paradigm of leadership in education and beyond, changing the narrative of what makes great leaders, so that it is fundamentally rooted in character and love, so that it is all about enabling others to flourish. We want to see leadership for flourishing as the model that is taught at every business school, the core training for head teachers and teachers. But not only that, we also want to see leadership set free from titles and positions. We want everyone to know that they can be a leader if they choose to step up and influence others for good. Because if we inspire and empower others to believe that they can and should lead wherever they are, if we start celebrating everyday acts of leadership, then we can unleash an extraordinary power in the world. And I'm going to pass over to Katie just to give a short story that really emphasizes the difference that could make.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Emmy, for those really, really inspiring words. And we actually got the really privileged opportunity of seeing this type of leadership in action. And it was at a school in Rwanda. And as we all know, there was an absolutely devastating conflict in Rwanda in the 90s. And yet the reconciliation has been extraordinary. And this school was such a brilliant example of this. It was an example where the teachers loved each other, truly loved each other. And the teachers therefore were able to truly love the pupils. The result of this was that the pupils were able to love their local community. And what we saw was a group of teenage girls who saw some veterans from the conflict who had been very heavily involved in this very, very violent, devastating conflict. And they cared about these veterans. They forgave them for the wrongs that they had done, and they wanted to welcome them back into the community. These veterans were actually disabled through their part in the conflict, and they weren't able to get into the community physically. They weren't able to come to the centre of the village, and these girls wanted to solve that. So not only did they build a beautiful relationship with these veterans, but they did something practical. They built a road for these veterans so that they were able to use their wheelchairs and come back into the heart of the village and be part of the community. They got the whole community behind it. They raised the money, they got the resources, they built the road together, and they welcomed these veterans back into the village. Emmy.
Yeah, so we just wanted to inspire you with that brilliant story of what it looks like when we actually let other people lead. So let's give leaders that we know the vision, the skills, and the permission to focus on flourishing. And let's set leadership free from it being about positions and titles so that we can expect and celebrate it in ourselves and in our students. And maybe it can just change the world and make it a little bit better.
Thank you. Thank you both for that inspiring, I can't believe it was only 5 minutes talk. It's amazing what we can accomplish in a short period of time. Next, we have Advancing Human Flourishing in the Profession of Medicine Through Caring and Character by Cheryl Marana and Bonnie Miller. Welcome, Cheryl and Bonnie.
So good morning. We're honored to be with you today to reflect on how educational systems in medicine can serve as regenerative spaces. For the Kern National Network for Caring and Character in Medicine, or KNN, regenerative space evokes the importance of creating safe, meaningful places to rejuvenate through reflection and human connection. Especially now, the profession of medicine is recognizing that creating these spaces is key to resilience, wellness, and maintaining the ties that bind us as a community. We think that incorporating caring and character into our clinical learning and practice environments supports exactly that. In fact, they are key constructs of our work. And now Bonnie will speak to those constructs. Bonnie?
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thanks also for this opportunity. On the screen, you can see the integrated framework that the KNN has developed to unify these concepts, building on the work of Notre scholars Joan Tronto, Marvin Berkowitz, and Harvard's own Tyler Vanderweel and others. A collaborative process, this framework's creation brought together healthcare educators, professionals, and scholars to reflect on these interrelated ideas. Each of the concepts, as you see on the screen, has a lot to unpack, but brief definitions give a general sense of what they encompass. If you'd like to learn more about the framework, please feel free to contact either Cheryl or me, or visit the link that's shown here on the slide. In essence, much as a tree's strong trunks and branches allow for thriving leaves, the interconnected elements of caring and character can be seen as the structure that supports human flourishing, while at the same time advancing the profession of medicine. With that as a foundation, the question becomes, how can we incorporate caring, character, and flourishing to create more regenerative environments in medical education and the practice of medicine?
Thank you, Bonnie. So in our work, we recognize the power of community and the need to connect, to convene, and catalyze this work. So within the KNN, some examples of collaborative initiatives that bring faculty and staff together across our 7 schools include looking at traits like collegiality and collaborative leadership during medical school admissions, providing mentors for students and purposeful growth for faculty by integrating elements of caring and character into preparation, training, and curriculum. Creating opportunities for our students to reflect on how they can apply character traits like courage to challenges. And supporting convenings and scholarship that pose fundamental questions about the profession and its role in flourishing. We also provide our learners with the opportunity to play a role in developing initiatives, as well as learning to foster regenerative spaces. They've been very actively engaged with us. And in that way, we think that the healthcare professionals of the future will be better able to help shape more satisfying practice environments, one that let them flourish personally while better serving their patients. Through supporting projects from student-led workshops to a lecture series on compassionate palliative care conversations, we have seen that medical students find it meaningful and restorative to connect and reflect in this way. As we look to build a national student network, we hope to sustain this sense of community. In closing, I would like to share a quote from a piece written by a medical student in our network. The student writes, "Living with character requires introspection to know the values that are important to me and audacity to embrace a life of authenticity." We think that regenerative spaces allow for this same sort of deep reflection and authenticity. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to participate in this community of practice, to learn from you as we seek to foster a similar atmosphere for learners and professionals in the field of medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl and Bonnie. And I know that some presenters are mentioning websites and contact information. You're able to put that in the chat. If you select panelists and attendees, you should be able to share any links or contact information. So thank you again. And we will now turn to the final of our first 4 flash talks with Ashley Lynn and Gary Shang. Welcome.
Thanks, Matthew. It's great to be here. My name is Gary Shang. I'm one of the co-founders of CU. Ashley, do you want to just give a quick intro of yourself?
Yeah, and my name is Ashley, and I'm one of the student leaders here.
Cool. So what is Civics Unplugged? We're a nonprofit empowering Gen Z to build the future of democracy. Our main initiative program is the CU Fellowship, which is a 4-month-long digital-first civic leadership program that helps kids find their U-shaped hole in the world. We do that through a new approach to civic education focused on systems thinking, personal development, democratic theory, and community building. And we have a really big emphasis on flourishing of the individual and society.
Yeah. And so by nature of our work, we do think a lot about how to create regenerative space within civic education. More and more young people are coming into kind of the civic space through youth activism, which is really powerful, but also often driven by anger and resistance. Young people look at our fraying political systems and other institutions with a lot of sadness, but not really knowing what to do about it. And what we've realized at CU over this past year is that in a world of uncertainty, what is more important than like pure civic education is that young people are really seeking spaces where they feel safe and cared for and loved. And that is really the most important thing that we can be creating at CU right now.
Yeah, so how do you even begin to create a regenerative context? It has to start with love.
Yeah. And so our working definition of love at CU is that love is really an invitation to expand your sense of self, right? It's an invitation to recognize just how interconnected we are, and how teachers are connected with their students, how students are connected with each other, and how we collectively are connected with the world.
Yeah, so the idea is to see that none of us would be here without the contributions of so many others. These are connections of care. And in this process of expanding our sense of self, we can start to see students as more than kind of brains on a stick, and really see them as fully holistic humans. I think it was on a podcast where we heard Matthew saying students experienced a moment of being fully seen, both in their strengths but also in their flaws in a classroom context. Is it possible to be seen fully? We think that leading with love is how we start to do that.
Yeah. And so something, I think that, perfectly captures this in our community is actually what one of our community members said on a trek, which is our recurring dialogue series at CU. We were having a conversation about education, and one of our builders dropped kind of just in the Zoom chat that the difference between Gary and my school is that Gary asks me how I'm doing, and my school asks me how my grades are doing first. And that sounds super simple, but I really don't think that leading with love is rocket science, right? Like, it makes sense for us to care about each other. We do want to be open. I think sometimes we just have to set aside that urge to move on to the next thing on the agenda, right? Or hit that next learning competency in order to just ask how people are.
Yeah, so in terms of how people at CU lead with love, there are a few practices we do that include one-on-ones. So one-on-one meetings between team members and peers, where we first, again, ask how we're doing in terms of our well-being before we get on to more tactical, like, productivity stuff. Another thing we do is we have a lot of our community members are in juntos, which are like small discussion and mutual support groups. Which it's all about like, mutual care. And then we also have this fun thing called tacos. So in our community Slack, you can send tacos and messages, and those are actually recorded. It's not like a form of currency, but like, well, in one way it is. But people have learned that this is just part of our, I guess, almost like community love language, that if I attach a taco to a message, I'm sending my appreciation.
Yeah. And so I think the common thread between all of these practices is that how we put leading with love into practice is really through an infinite conversation of gratitude and empathy, right? So gratitude, giving tacos through our Sunday shout outs, always starting with gratitude at the beginning of our juntos. Even noticing and appreciating, like even one person noticing and appreciating your ideas and contributions and feelings and thoughts is really powerful. And then from there, it's much easier to move into empathy, And in our one-on-ones, the process is really just centered around, how do we listen mindfully and really inquire about thoughts and feelings, and really, authentically seek to understand without problem solving about what students are facing, and really trusting young people to have the answers and seeing our role as, as a coach to help them uncover it. Yeah, that is really what we wanted to share today. So thank you all so much.
Thank you both, Ashley and Gary. And we had some issues with some attendees getting the link earlier, so we got a little bit of a slow start. So we've taken our time for conversation for this first set of flash talks. I do want to preserve a couple of minutes for silent reflection. So if you want, you can just turn off your camera for a couple of minutes and reflect on how the content of these first talks is landing for you and what it might suggest for you in terms of your own sort of educational practice or whatever sector that you're a part of. So let's just take a couple of minutes and we'll come back at 10:35 in 2 minutes. Okay, welcome back. And at any time, you can use the Q&A function. We will have some time for questions and answers at 10:50. And we will resume with our next set of flash talks, starting with Nick Holton and Sharon Russell, who will talk about a future framework for flourishing schools. Welcome, Nick and Sharon.
Good morning. Thank you. I'll just say hi real quickly and let Nick do the same. I'm Sharon Russell. I am the Director of Student Support and Co-Director of Positive Education at the Shipley School. Nick, do you want to say hi?
I'm Nick Holton, the other Co-Director of Positive Education at Shipley.
Great. So we're going to talk just a little bit about a framework that we've been working on. I'll give you a bit of history into how we got here. Shipley is a pre-K to 12 independent school just outside of Philadelphia. We actually began teaching our students social emotional skills way back in 1995. I would say well before it was the thing to do. And we're very proud of that history. But around 2016, we were introduced to some of the ideas and concepts in positive psychology and positive education, and really began thinking about this as a whole school approach and how we could really do this work with the adults in the community. I think, in schools, obviously our focus is on our students. However, with the introduction of positive education based on the work that's been done for many years at the Geelong Grammar School in Australia, we began training our faculty and staff, we call them colleagues here, I would say in the PERMA V model, and Nick, if you don't mind going to the next slide, and I'll just talk a little bit about some of the aspects of the framework that we are looking at. And obviously with the influence of this amazing community of practice that we've been involved with, and the generous time and energy from people in this group. We were introduced to Harvard's individual and community flourishing measure. We have obviously, as I mentioned, been trained in Penn and positive psychology's PERMA V or PERMA Plus. And I would say with Nick's addition to our team this year, he brought his wealth of background and some of the other well-being measures and well-being models around the world. So this is an example of how we took kind of a side-by-side approach, and there were actually a few more on here. We picked just kind of the top 4, maybe most well-known. So PERMA V, the Harvard Flourishing Model, Scott Barry Kaufman's sailboat metaphor based on Maslow, and then Carol Riff's psychological well-being. And when we put those side by side, what we developed was our own model for flourishing, which has 8 areas or domains. I'm not going to read those out to you down the side, but this is what we are using in our school to map our social emotional curriculum. We are rolling this out to use as a larger model around faculty engagement, evaluation, development, colleague engagement, really a whole school approach. And Nick, do you want to go ahead and jump into the next part?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so much really lovely overlap with a lot of what folks have said already this morning. I think the simple way to sort of help understand, school bells, we're in an actual school. What we're trying to do here is Sharon and I essentially kind of divide duties, and Sharon primarily focuses on our student population. I primarily focus on our adult population. Katie and Emmy referenced earlier that if we really, want students to be flourishing, or anyone to be flourishing, leaders and the adults need to be flourishing as well. And I love the idea, I think it's from Gary and Ashley, of sending tacos as well. That might have to make the framework at some point. But yeah, so these are sort of the 8 categories that when you look at these 4 frameworks, when you look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, that we kind of thought are in many ways, shapes, and forms essential to human potential. Sharon mentioned Scott Barry Kaufman. We just recently partnered with his newly launched Center for the Science of Human Potential. We believe human potential is the world's greatest resource, and we're really hoping to become a school that helps cultivate that resource in a really regenerative sort of way, a win-win sort of way. So of course, the challenge here is that a lot of what we're kind of looking at and we've done in the past, and a lot of the science around it, of course, is very often, I think a lot of us are aware, is very often kind of conducted with quote unquote weird samples. So we are also in a situation where simultaneous to encouraging flourishing, we're really trying to make sure that it's flourishing for all. So our sort of core definition of educational excellence is certainly achievement, and we mean that fairly broadly, the accomplishment of goals, the development of mastery in ways that are meaningful. It's not grades, test scores, those sorts of things, but also individual well-being and collective well-being. And so what that means for us is, as we go forward, we want to be very thoughtful about how we sort of fuse this framework and these various frameworks and important components with elements of diversity, equity, inclusion, and really make sure that we're thoughtful about creating flourishing for everyone. So that's kind of the quick synopsis in our literal 5-minute flash talk, but our emails are right here if anyone would like to reach out, and we'll put them in the chat as well. So thank you very much for the time and for your attention. We appreciate it.
Thanks to you both. And I see the panelists are now starting to put links and contact information into the chat box. And panelists, you have to select panelists and attendees in order for everyone to see that. Next, we have my colleague Renee Wilkinson on back to high school, using high schools to understand sub-baccalaureate health disparities. Renee, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. I am going to be presenting a study that is in progress, and I would first like to acknowledge my colleagues with whom this project is in progress, Matthew Anderson at Baylor University and Vita Marilani at Cornell University. Research has consistently shown that more schooling is associated with better physical health. This positive relationship is referred to as the education health gradient. Studies also find a robust inverse relationship between educational attainment and mental health issues like depression. So what is sub-baccalaureate attainment? This group includes those who attended college but did not earn a bachelor's degree. It comprises those with academic and technical associate degrees and those with some college but no degree. As of 2019, this group represents approximately 26% of the working age population in the United States, or 1 in 4 Americans. This is more than those with bachelor's degrees and is similar to the prevalence of those with a high school diploma only. Studies have shown mixed results in the health returns to having some college compared to having a high school degree only. This has been called a glitch or anomaly in the gradient. Studies show that adults in this group are comparable to those with only a high school degree, or worse in terms of their physical health. And one study examining mental health returns to attainment did not find significant mental health returns to sub-baccalaureate education for depression compared to having a high school degree only. In the study that we have underway, we use AdHealth, which is a national longitudinal data set that spans high school to young adulthood, to consider the role of high schools in explaining mental health differences linked to sub-baccalaureate education. In this study, we are homing in on economic, academic, and socio-emotional high school resources. And we're looking at these and their role in mental health benefits, net of a comprehensive set of individual, family, and neighborhood characteristics. Our preliminary results highlight several key protective aspects of high schools that matter for young adult mental health among sub-baccalaureate education attainers. One of the standout qualities that we've identified is school connectedness. And this is a sense of feeling close to the people at your high school, a sense of belonging and happiness. And this factor, this quality, matters net of other quality measures like student-teacher ratio and average test scores, GPA in the school, economic resources, and other school characteristics like whether it's a private institution, et cetera. This factor, school connectedness, may lead to individuals with some college but no degree, more closely resembling those with a bachelor's degree rather than those with only a high school diploma. So what I would encourage us to do is think about education as a pathway to flourishing in terms of both quantity, so attainment, and quality, or the factors that may matter pre-college. School qualities like school connectedness may carry enduring benefits for mental health regardless of post-secondary degree completion. And nurturing these factors could contribute to long-term flourishing across the life course. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee, and appreciate the extra minute you've given us to get back on track. Gilda, without any delay, let us move to your presentation on positive education, a flourishing educational ecosystem. Welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matthew. I'm going to try to gain another minute, but I doubt it. Promoting flourishing in education has become an increasingly popular focus, and several study and intervention programs focused on positive children development, resilience, strength, moral education. And positive education focuses on the skill development for well-being and achievement in education, with the primary goals are to enhance students' well-being through utilizing academic development and promoting student engagement. But let's remind ourselves that neither education or flourishing are disposable. The pandemic has brought to light the innate flaws in our culture, in our economy, and as well as the heightened existing fears towards our future and our students' future. So how do we avoid inequity and suffering and ensure that our children are prepared for any unpredictability and volatility? Are we truly, really prepared to deal with other major global threats, or global warming, or collapse of the ecosystem, or loss of biodiversity, just to name a few? However, there is a reason to be optimistic, I think, and as we emerge from this abyss, many people are expressing an eagerness to embark on a new direction, as we heard today from so many of you, rather than the return to the status quo. But what we know is that a bias and assumption can heavily influence people's systems. And rather focusing on how to recover for this crisis, schools need to consider how they can adapt and build a robust and scalable framework that can improve and respond more effectively to the complexity of the challenges that we are facing. I think when we are moving with great intention, but we're asking still the wrong question and thus solving the wrong problems. Focusing on how to better move children through the system and how can I assess their performance, we end up with a system that is still failing our students. This system we know that no longer works. Now, positive education offers an approach to understanding learning that blends academic study, which is still very necessary, pedagogy, life skills such as self-awareness, emotional regulation, positive attitude and mindsets, mindfulness, positive habits, all grounded in the science of well-being to promote the character development and optimal functioning, engagement in learning and resilience. What we do know is that our society always needs creative thinkers, humanistic perspective, empathic citizens, and deeply principled people who can face big complex questions and collaborate across the lines of differences. And we have now the opportunity to construct a path to flourishing for our children. But how we approach the now impacts the future of our students and children. And the vigilance, doing everything today that we might need for tomorrow, provides the antidote for passivity and prediction. To be able to flourish, children need to self-actualize, to learn, to develop skills, employ consistent values, and research the human, enrich their human potential. And they need a physical and social environment that foster growth, and that they need undoubtedly they fall psychological and social psychological needs, autonomy, competence, social connection, and meaning. Now, this means that to live a flourishing life that is right for them personally, they need to be able to make informed choices about the options they have available to them, align their values and their unique patterns of personal predilection, values, and strengths. And this takes me is aligned with how Aristotle philosophized about happy or eudaimonic life. He said a good life results when an individual is able to take deliberate action aligned with their values and strengths. Now, these deliberate choices are core to our flourishing, and all our choices are based on our capabilities, characters, and beliefs. Now, we just developed a framework and for the regenerative space, and we feel that the very top qualities and concepts for regenerative space in education are self-efficacy, the self-awareness, the self-management, consciousness, gratitude, growth, existentialism, curiosity, open-mindedness, exploration, passion, self-direction and motivation, courage, having the ability to, and determination and confidence in taking risk, navigating life's challenges, zest and optimism. Not lastly, mental toughness, which we all need, the grit and the perseverance to face any obstacles we might face, ethics, integrity, respect, altruism and tolerance, and not lastly, leadership, which is very important, strength-based leadership, responsibility, abnegation, dependability, and diversity. Our intervention focused on students developing these personal skills and qualities without neglecting the environmental factors such as cultural context, socioeconomic status, physical space, and other ecological factors that impact the well-being. So when designing environments and experiences that lead to a particular set of capabilities and characters, it requires both an understanding of the future outcome goals, as well as the authentic ways we practice these skills today. So we need to improve the quality of learning for students to better align our educational practices with social and economic and environmental needs. Education leaders at all levels of the educational ecosystem have the critical role to play in deconstructing the factory model schooling and reform. And positive education for education regeneration definitely raises new and more questions than answers at this stage, but endeavors to make the opportunity visible and tangible. And we all have the responsibility to help our children flourish by giving them the right skills. Only through collaboration between researchers, educators, policymakers, we can create the necessary change. And I do hope that this talk has prompted more questions than it has answered. I do not profess to have a formula for what the future of education should look like, but I'm very passionate in my belief that the current system is unfit for purpose and must change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gilda. And all of the presentations up to this point are speaking to related concerns and offering a new vision of a path forward. We have a couple of minutes now for questions. You're free to use the Q&A. I see some of you have, and one of the questions was, how do we connect with panelists? One way is to go to our website for the community of practice and reach out to me, learn a little bit more about the community, reach out to me, and join some of our large group meetings and become involved in some of the working groups that we have. Let's see if there's a question here. I will read it. Yes, so the question is, are the monthly community of practice meetings a good way to follow up? And absolutely, that's what I was just saying. So please do reach out if you're interested in more ongoing conversation. If something that one of our panelists has said interests you specifically, feel free to address a question directly to the panelist. In the Q&A, we can continue to have questions being typed and responded to by the panelists as we move forward, even beyond the question and answer period. And thank you, Beth, for also putting that link into the chat box. So we will now move into our final set of flash talks, starting with Gabrielle Landry, a rising junior, if I remember correctly, at Harvard, talking about promoting flourishing and meaning at Harvard. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you so much, Matt, for having me. And thanks to all the other panelists who have spoken so far. I'm learning a lot. So my question is really, how might we promote flourishing and meaning among college students? It's a big question, but I think we can look at it from a creative lens. What is one small step that we can take to help college students develop a personal answer to the question, what am I doing here? What are we doing here? I would like to share with you one promising approach that I piloted as a sophomore at Harvard last year, and that I intend to expand upon when I return from my gap year this fall. The biggest takeaway from my experience is that approaches to flourishing and meaning formation at the college level should be intentional, friendship promoting, and frequent, or at least consistent. By the time I reached my sophomore spring, I had developed a few good friendships, I was enjoying my classes, and I was starting to envision various paths in my chosen concentration of philosophy. But I still felt that there was something missing. As I thought about it, I realized that amidst the busyness of my first year and a half at Harvard, I hadn't had an opportunity to step back and reflect with friends about what we're doing here. With countless clubs, events, PSATs, and papers, Harvard is not always the most conducive to conversations of this nature in classes or with friends even. So in partnership with the Abigail Adams Institute and the Human Flourishing Program, I launched a pilot project in spring 2020. 7 other students and I formed a discussion group centered around the question, what are we doing here? Over the course of 4 sessions, 2 over dinner on campus and 2 on Zoom after we all left campus, we discussed readings and questions on the themes of friendship, scholarship, virtual human interactions, and flourishing at college. Although some of our activities were no longer possible in the second half of the semester, the 3 goals remained our focus. Number 1, meeting together to discuss these essential questions of college life. Number 2, individual reflection through the readings and journal prompts. And 3, growing relationships, which became harder after we left campus, but we originally did this through group dinners and one-on-one meals on campus. In the feedback form, one student reflected, quote, "I truly felt that I was able to recover a humane part of myself in each meeting, as it was a time when time slowed down to think and enjoy the company of people I would have never met before." Another student shared, quote, "This experience helped me orient my approach to my future time at Harvard and think about what was most meaningful to me." Although this is just a flash description of the project, I want to discuss the 3 points I mentioned earlier as takeaways for future projects to promote flourishing and meaning among college students. First, the group was intentional. After talking with some potential participants, I planned out the themes and readings for each session to ensure that they were relevant and thought-provoking. The group was explicitly oriented toward the unique position of college students. We don't have our full-time jobs, spouses, or children yet, and from the research, we know that these are some of the biggest things that help older adults form a sense of meaning in life. So as young adults, we need young adult-oriented initiatives. This is why our group focused on friendship, scholarship, and flourishing at college specifically. Second, the group was friendship promoting. We're not just discussing or debating an abstract set of ideas, but asking fundamental questions about what makes life meaningful. Thus, efforts should aim to promote true friendship among college students. Some examples to do this are to meet over a meal, arrange one-on-one meals or meetings among participants, or invite people to sign up with friends. You can also allow for student-initiated activities such as outings or dinners. Finally, frequent and consistent. Our group met over the course of 4 sessions as a first pilot, but feedback revealed that more frequent meetings would have been even better. Efforts to promote flourishing and meaning can't just be a one-time event during freshman orientation. What are we doing here is an enduring question that we return to throughout each semester as our lives change, and that if we explore during college can set us up well for life after. So where do we go from here? The model of a small student-led discussion group is just one example. Students, professors, administrators, and others who care about college students should take creative steps forward to promote flourishing and meaning. As we figure out best practices and approaches, we should start by being intentional, promoting friendship, and remaining frequent and consistent with our efforts. From there, new best practices and lessons are sure to follow. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Gabby. It's great to have a student perspective. And now the final 2 flash talks will be presented by our conference co-organizers. We'll start with Christina Hinton on Research Schools International, promoting flourishing in schools. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you about a project that we're planning to promote flourishing in schools, and you're welcome to reach out to me if you'd like to learn more. And I'm hoping that it will provide a helpful example as well for how schools might approach supporting flourishing. So as many of you are aware, the Human Flourishing Program has collated a list of research-based practices that promote flourishing. Here are some examples. So one is acts of kindness. And what's wonderful about this one is it, of course, promotes the flourishing of the people doing the kindness as well as the people who receive the kindness. And also research shows that then the person who received the kindness is more likely to carry out an act of kindness in the future as well. So it can lead to this beautiful cascade of more and more kindness. Another is recognizing and savoring the good. And so a very simple way of doing this is using mindfulness, for example. And a colleague of mine, Emiliana Rodriguez, who's in the audience at the moment, has developed some wonderful tools for doing mindfulness in school at her organization, Attainment, if you want to check that out. Lots of wonderful free resources, mainly in Spanish, but we are working on translating. Creating communities and connection. This one is so fundamental. Research has shown that really this is a better predictor of your happiness and various health outcomes than a whole range of characteristics, including your income, your religion, your gender, even your health. So this is really key, like building strong social bonds. Another is volunteering, which of course is related to communities and acts of kindness. And then finally, gratitude. And one thing that's nice about gratitude in schools is that a really quite brief intervention can have a powerful impact. So for example, just a week-long intervention that takes a handful of minutes actually was found to promote happiness and decrease depressive symptoms, not only directly after, but 6 months later when they did nothing else. So that's quite impressive, I think. And there are many others as well. So you can learn more about this on the Human Flourishing Program's website. So building on this brilliant work of our colleagues, we would like to support schools to incorporate these into their practice on the ground. And the way that we're going to approach that is with a 2-year program of research and professional development. So in the first year, we want to look at, given these practices that research shows promote flourishing, how much are they happening at the school? And we'd like to look at what's going well as where there are some areas for growth. So which are the practices that aren't happening that much? And we'd also like to collect illustrative examples of these. So we'll have rich examples to provide inspiration of how to do these various practices in a school context. In the following year, we'll then lead some professional development at the school where we'll share our results. So at each school, we'll say, here is where you're really promoting flourishing, and here are some areas where you can better develop those practices in your school. And then we'll guide the teachers to actually develop what in research we call an intervention. It's just a practice to target the areas for growth that are identified. So really to hone in on those areas where there's more that can be done. We're also planning, COVID pending, to bring all of the schools together for an international symposium where we share across the schools. And that's really nice as well, to provide inspiration for various things you could be doing. And then everyone will go back to their schools and they'll actually implement the practices that they designed. And finally, in this year, we'll lead them through an action research program so they can reflect on the impact of implementing that intervention. So this is really designed to help take the research and get it into the practice and help the researchers and the practitioners work together to make sure that the practitioners are reflecting on this in a kind of structured way that will help them continue doing this work. And so if you're interested in learning more, you're welcome to reach out to me and I will share my contact in the chat as well. Or if you just want to learn about how we work or how you might do it at your school, I'm always happy to support and to chat. So feel free to reach out, that's my email. And thank you, Matt, so much for this.
Thank you, Christina, and great closing image there. And finally, our last flash talk of Justin Blake on reimagining education.
Thank you, Matt. And so enjoying the sessions today, have been wonderful. So this image of Nelson Mandela in South Africa, Robben Island, 27 years in isolation. There's some incredible research from Harvard. One of the pioneering first female professors, Ellen Langer. She had a group of students who believed that fighter pilots would have amazing vision. And so there was an eye test carried out. And the people were dressed in fighter pilot uniforms. They even got into cockpits in flight simulators. And they then adopted the mindset of the fighter jet pilot. The ones who had the imagination, who imagined themselves as fighter jet pilots, who immersed themselves, their mindsets, truly immersed in their imaginations as fighter jet pilots. When they looked out the wing of the plane, their eyesight was transformed. The vision, their physical vision was changed and their eyesight improved. Other similar studies carried out show and remind us of the extraordinary human potential that we have. But when we reimagine our circumstances, our imagination unlocks the power of the psychology of possibility. Nelson Mandela is a brilliant example of this, who, although he was within isolation for 27 years, he was reimagining a different future. I simply want to just share, so support all the ideas shared today, and not wanting to kind of re-echo those, simply want to share one model and then a story to finish. So this is about reimagining education together through the power of culture. This model comes from years of research, not just from Harvard, but Stanford. I'm working with the 100 Global team on innovation for impact and transformation. And we have research on our website that is free. Please make use of our website, www.100.org. There is some brilliant research there about developing an innovation-friendly culture in our organizations, in our schools, in our workplaces. This research builds on work from universities like Harvard and Stanford and others around the world. And this is work that we are carrying out in schools across the UK and also in America and other settings. In essence, this is the model. And I would love you to reflect on this, take this away and explore this for your culture and your organization. Organizations do not transform people. People transform organizations. And the way that we do that is getting really clear on what our values are, what our vision is. And our vision and our mission work hand in hand with our values. Our values then drive our culture. Our culture drives our behavior. And our behavior will then drive and reinforce our vision and our mission. If all of the things that we have been learning about today and reflecting on are then embedded in a culture, this becomes a powerful, transformative, virtuous culture. One of the things I'm passionate about is the transformation of culture, because actually things don't transform and change unless we really do that through a values and purpose-led flourishing culture. So we need flourishing in everything. And that comes from people who are flourishing themselves. So as we flourish as human beings, we create together a flourishing culture for our children to flourish and thrive and become more flourishing human beings that then also impact on society. I had a wonderful, beautiful moment a few weeks ago, a couple of months back, where I woke up and I imagined myself on Robben Island. Never had this thought before, but I was tapping into what Ken Robinson talks about, which is the power of creativity and imagination. You would have seen his TED talk, Schools Kill Creativity. I imagined myself on Robben Island and with the prison cells of Nelson Mandela. That day I received a phone call from someone I hadn't been in touch with very often for many years, and we reconnected. He reached out to me spontaneously and said, "Justin, I've got a gift for you. I really feel from intuition this is for you." And he said, the gift is I would love to connect you to Christo Brand, who is in charge of the prison cells of Robben Island, a close friend of Nelson Mandela. So my gift to you and to your schools, your organizations, is for you to connect, like Christina said at the beginning about having connections today. My gift to you is to connect with Christo Brand, which is to connect you with his talks and his inspirational messages about the life of Nelson Mandela. And you can reach out to me via email and I can connect you to him. The feedback is amazing, highly inspiring. And this is someone who was one of the closest friends of Nelson Mandela, now sharing insights and wisdom and lessons from Nelson Mandela's friendship with him to children and educators around the world. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Justin. And please feel free, everyone, to use the Q&A box. We will now have just a short break before we move into our final session looking forward, and then end on time at 11:30. So feel free to turn off your cameras and again, take a moment for silent reflection. Think about what this means in your life, the work that people are doing, how you might want to connect with it. If you would like to reach out to the community of practice and get involved in our ongoing work, feel free to visit our webpage and connect with me at the email listed there. So we'll just take 2 minutes to engage in some silent reflection. Okay, welcome back. We will now look forward with Amrita, Christine, and Beth, who have been with the community of practice since its very beginning over 2 years ago. And the title of their talk is, well, you can see it as, is Education as the Pathway to Flourishing. So welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So for next 8 to 10 minutes, what we are going to do is basically share the work that we have been doing in the last 2.5 years. I just want to give some context before we kind of start with our slides. So Matt, in your opening comment, you said that only 17% of people are flourishing, which in another way, 83% of people are not flourishing, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is, so the field of education has done some great work when it comes to addressing the needs of students in terms of their well-being. But as we know that we are still facing a crisis when it comes to the well-being of our students and also adults and their parents, and pretty much the entire society. So we are basing our work on the premise that education is the backbone of the society, and that if you want to make change and we want to get our kids to be well and flourish, education needs to change, and the way we are doing work in education needs to change. So having said that, Christine, if you can just go to the next slide, that will be awesome. So what we want to do today is just share the model that we're using to kind of bring about this change. And then we say change in terms of how education can actually start to address the well-being needs of students. So some great work has already been done in the field of education. We have had several approaches that have come on the horizon to address the well-being of students. Positive education is one approach that has done wonderful work. Trauma-informed approach is another thing that has come up in the last 10 years. Restorative practices, and they have done a lot of good. However, there's a lot that we still need to do. And that is some of the lessons that Christine, Beth, and myself, we have been asking as we have been doing this work. What is it that still needs to be done? Why is it that we have all these approaches, but we are still facing this crisis? And some of the things that we have learned that we want to share with you is that we are not necessarily using a holistic approach to address the well-being side of things. So when I say that, what I mean is that we only 1 or 2% of teacher education program actually teaches their teachers how to address the well-being needs of students. When you look at the curriculum and instruction and what we are teaching students, well-being is just an add-on, right? It is not something that is taught every day. It is not something that is addressed every day. You have teacher and leadership programs. We don't necessarily address and teach them and prepare them to address the needs of students, right? So what we have recognized that is that if we want to bring about change in education where it is equipped to meet the well-being needs of the future generation, we have to address well-being on all different fronts. We cannot just focus on the students, we have to focus on quite a few different pieces as well. So as you can see in this slide, we have to take into consideration the parents and what family support can education provide. We have to look at the curriculum and instruction that we are delivering to the students. We have to look at the policies that are being implemented to address the needs of the well-being needs of students. What is the teacher education program and leadership program doing to prepare these leaders and teachers to be equipped to meet the needs? What is the policies how are they addressing the well-being needs? And also the private sector, right? Because they also have a part to play in the well-being side of things when it comes to our future generation. So what we are going to do in the next few minutes is going to show you what are some of the things we are doing on all these fronts to kind of prepare education to meet the needs of our future generation and also our current generation, I guess, in some ways. Christine, if you can go to the next slide, I'll be.
All right. So this is one of the ways in which we are attempting to really integrate education integrate flourishing into education, and it is through these education for flourishing standards. And Beth is going to put these standards where you can find them into the chat. We also have a paper coming out that has these outlined, so stay tuned for that. But these education for flourishing standards, they really are the underpinning, and you can use these with any population. So rather than sort of segmenting out, well, these are only for students, these are only for high school students, these are only for elementary school students, these are only for university students, or even these are only for teachers. This is for everyone. These are not just for students. This is for everyone, and this is what makes this approach hopefully unique, in that we are trying to address not just students, not just teachers, but society as a whole. So a few of the things that we are planning on talking about are the current projects that we have been working on in integrating education for flourishing. So first, we are starting with this idea of PK through 12 settings. We're working in existing schools, and also we're going to work on the creation of new schools, and Beth is going to talk about that in just a little bit. University settings, these two go hand in hand. We are professors at universities, and so we have access to both the PK through 12 settings as well as our own students. We are in teacher preparation programs. We teach both undergrad, graduate, and PhD level students, and so this work is going to be really embedded into all three of those levels. And then through that, we are also researchers. And so we are applying research and disseminating the projects, the information and the data that we collect from these projects through, we're going to basically inform policy through the work that we're doing in both PK through 12 and also university settings. And so we're going to go through some of the more details of some of the projects that we're doing. And so Amrita is going to talk a little bit about the university piece, and I'll talk a little bit about the PK through 12 setting.
So for the last 9 months, we have been working on integrating the 6 domains of human flourishing and the standards that Christine just shared with you in a redesigned teacher education program at the St. Louis University School of Education. So basically what is going to happen is every teacher who goes through this program will have learned about these domains, will have learned how to integrate these standards into their teaching. And these domains and standards will be addressed in at least 10 or 12 courses through their program. The next thing we have done is we specifically offer a course that's called Art and Science of Human Flourishing, which again is based on the 6 domains of flourishing, where students learn about those domains, they learn those techniques that promote flourishing in these domains, and then they get the chance to implement it in their own lives. That course is going to be a part of the university core, so all students will have the opportunity to take that course at St. Louis University. And then at Notre Dame of Maryland University, Christina has been working on a post-baccalaureate certificate, which is called Social and Emotional Learning and Flourishing. So that will be something that will be, I think, Christine, is it being in the process of being approved through the Maryland Department of Education? So hopefully that will be offered starting next year.
And then just very quickly, I know we're running a little bit short on time, but one of the things that we're also doing, apart from the university setting, is that we've embedded what's called the multi-tiered support for flourishing into schools. And so just very quickly, what that looks like, we have 3 tiers. Tier 1 is supporting universal support. So this is some supports that everyone gets. Tier 2 is small group support for teachers, leaders, staff, students, and families. And then Tier 3 support, we have a coaching for flourishing model that we've also created. And so these are just, and these are for everyone. This is not just for students. And so that's, and so these are examples of some of the things we've done. One, we've integrated the Education for Flourishing standards into existing school curriculum with the help of Tara Segre and Jamie Culp at Broadneck High School. So we're working on the ground with teachers to see pilot, how does this work? 2, there's something that we've done also at Broadneck called the Student Alliance for Flourishing Club, and we're just starting to set up chapters around the world with this club. And so if you're interested, please reach out to us after. And then this summer, we're doing a summer bridge program in a school in St. Louis to bring flourishing into their summer bridge programming. And then Tier 3, as I said, we have a coaching model that we're implementing with students, staff, and faculty. And so Beth is going to talk just briefly about the indicators of success and moving forward.
Thanks, Christine. So one of the big things for us is knowing whether or not we are successful in integrating flourishing into schools and into programs. And so we're looking to seek these particular indicators here. I won't go through them, but we expect to see increases in certain behaviors and outcomes, and we hope to see evidence of high quality and frequency with regard to the number of programs and the impact and implementation of the practices that we feel are part of integration into schools. So here we offer you our vision of what we hope to see for Education for Flourishing. There are 2 pieces, existing schools and pipeline development. We see it existing in 4 phases. Right now, we are in phase 1, where we're infusing select practices into existing schools, as Christine shared, and piloting coursework and certification, as Amrita shared. We hope to see existing school transformations and more universities adopting flourishing. And we hope to see our schools that have transformed become exemplars of how this can be done. And more leaders and teachers receiving certificates and programs so that this practice really is scaled up to the world. And we hope in phase 4 to open and manage flagship flourishing schools, as well as see Masters of Ed, EdD, and PhD programs in Education for Flourishing.
And we will put these emails in the chat if you'd like more information, but thank you everyone for a great first Thought Leadership Conference.
Great, thank you, Amrita, Christine, and Beth. And if you want to put in the chat box also the link for the September event, that would be great for attendees as well. It's been a great honor for me to learn from the collective wisdom of the members, both US and international members of our community of practice, and to share with you all today some of their wisdom by offering too short of a time for each of them to go, but there were so many 5 minutes was all we could spare to include as many as possible. I want to take a brief moment to express my gratitude to all of the presenters and to our organizational co-hosts today. Special thanks to the director of the Human Flourishing Program, Tyler Vanderweel, for his support of the community of practice, and many others at Harvard who supported this event, including Brendan, Wojtek, Plamen, and Trenton. I also thank everyone who showed up today and contributed to our ongoing conversation. Several of you shared by email directly to me or in private chats or in the public Q&A. So thank you for that. I hope that this work promotes regeneration in education and more flourishing in the world. And finally, thanks to Justin and Christina for co-organizing with me. And Justin and Christina, if you'd like to offer any final thoughts, there's a space to do that now. And I'll note that this video will be posted on our website in case you know of someone who wanted to attend but had a schedule conflict. The video is available in the near future.
Thank you, Matt. I'll just jump in really quick just to say thank you so much for all the contributions, for all those who joined us. If you know of other people leading on flourishing, leading on transformation, and leading on progressive education in your region or your country, please reach out to us. We would love to make these wider connections on transformation globally and love all the wonderful work that's happening. Matt, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to chime in as well and just thank each of you for the wonderful work that you're doing in the world to help make the world a bit brighter for all of us and all of our people in our shared global community. So just thank you. I know a lot of time and effort and energy and love goes into what you're doing. So thank you for that.
I think, Christina, your quote in the chat box is a fitting way to conclude. Let us be grateful to the people who make us happy. They are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you all for being here today and even staying a few minutes over. We somehow managed to cover all of the flash talks, and I'm very grateful that this worked so well technically that we didn't have too many problems to slow us down. So thanks to everybody who helped with that, and we hope to see some of you in the community of in our community of practice monthly meetings moving forward. Be well.